Hello and welcome to another edition of Inside the Burrow, the FAU podcast for and by fans. My name is Dan. I am joined as usual by Shane and Jack. And tonight we are bringing you another off-season show where we're gonna dig into a little bit of conference realignment and maybe throw out some other things in there. But really, the conference realignment has been getting the most talk. As of recently, there's been a couple articles, one by Patrick McGee, which is kind of really lays out nicely how FAU fits into conference realignment, and then Football Scoop also put out a great article. And basically, the idea is to finally combine the Sun Belt and Conference USA, and we'll reference the articles in the show notes, and you guys can check them out on Twitter. But and we'll talk about who FAU would be playing with and stuff like that. But really this is a point I think a lot of people have been talking about this idea for a while, and it makes sense to have more geographic options for schools. And one of the articles pointed out more for it's even more important for like the Olympic sports, for women's soccer, men's tennis, that type of stuff. I mean, football, you only travel 4 times a year, so it's not quite as much, even though the number of people traveling is more. But it makes so much sense for FAU to play Georgia State, Georgia Southern versus UTEP. So I think that's a pretty cool thing, and it kind of seems as if there's some traction here. So I'd love to get your thoughts, Jack. What your first thought when thinking about FAU being able to play Georgia State, flying up to Atlanta, in one day. There's a whole lot more travel options with FAU playing more teams in the Sun Belt. What are your thoughts with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think about we're having this discussion, considering that we were so excited to get out of the Sun Belt 5, 6, 7 years ago. I'd be excited for a lot of closer trips. I know we all love to travel for FAU, especially for me. I mean, I travel to see FAU every Friday night or early Saturday morning when I have to go to Boca Raton. So if I get the chance to fly into Atlanta or Mobile, instead of seeing if I can make a trip to Huntington or El Paso, whatever, I'm on board. I'm all for it. The coronavirus has really forced our hand and the hands of a lot of G5 programs when it comes to realignment. This specific realignment involving Conference USA and the Sun Belt, it's been really, really quality message board material for several years now. But again, with the coronavirus, I think it's getting some legitimate traction. And we see that with University of Louisiana, or as some people call them, Louisiana Lafayette, Ragin' Cajuns. I am on board with calling them University of Louisiana, in case you couldn't tell. Their AD seems to be the first person to publicly say that he's on board with this type of conference realignment. Now, it's interesting. We got to take note that ULL is in the Sun Belt, so they want the opportunity to play a team like Louisiana Tech, North Texas, UTSA, Southern Miss. I don't think those programs would be excited to be playing Louisiana Lafayette and Louisiana Monroe and Texas State. But again, these are crazy times. Maybe our hands are going to be forced here. But like you said, it's definitely more for the Olympic sports because it's scary. We see Olympic sports getting cut left and right all over the country, especially at the G5 level. So if doing this shift, we're able to if we're able to save some programs from being cut, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, I think the main thing is I was just trying to scroll quickly and get the distance between Old Dominion and UTEP. It's some crazy amount of miles. The Conference USA now spreads 3 time zones. Okay, it's we talk about the conference and FAU growing its fan base and gaining an identity and TV traction. It doesn't help when you're so far spread out, right? I don't think we lose any quality in play. I actually, one of the Football Scoop article suggested breaking basically, I guess, Conference USA belt, as they called it, and having Georgia State, Georgia Southern, Coastal Carolina, FAU, FIU, South Alabama. We'll get to that, why they're there. And a few of the other schools in the South, and like West Kentucky, Middle Tennessee, Marshall, Old Dominion, UNCC, and App State, all in the northern part of the conference. Like, to me, it doesn't make sense, and especially with college football attendance struggling these days. Why isn't Charlotte and App State playing each other once a year? I mean, they played each other, I think, the last 2 years in a non-conference schedule, but that should be a rivalry. I mean, for each team, that's probably a guaranteed sellout game, right? Just the most of the fan. You're just going to get a boost because of the in-state rivalry, right? You're going to get a few people to drive the 2, 3, 4 hours, whatever that trip is. I mean, like, Dan pointed out, it's easier for FAU fans to get to most of these schools in the east, in the eastern part. I don't think it hurts the level of competition. I even like that a lot of these schools that we'd be kind of paired with are schools that have all been kind of coming up to, they're not like the Louisiana Texan Southern Miss. Georgia Southern is, yes, played forever, but they've always been a dominant FCS program and has done well. I mean, they beat a ranked App State last year. Georgia Southern, we know, beat Florida a couple years ago, well known for running the triple option. Coastal Carolina, just outside of Myrtle Beach, okay? And a little bit, I like some of these destinations better, and I like just being pushed in one time zone. I think there's a real identity. Okay, we're basically the SEC East light, right? I mean, instead of trying to be, I guess, a version of a little Mountain West, a little SEC West, and a little SEC East, right? I think overall it's better for FAU regionally.
Yeah, SEC diet, 0 calorie, something like that. No, I agree. And I think we align ourselves culturally with the likes of Coastal and Georgia State and South Alabama. Good destinations. Georgia State now plays at Turner Field. South Alabama is getting a brand new on-campus stadium, which is going to open this year. Georgia Southern got renovations. Coastal had renovations. Old Dominion basically built a brand new stadium. We can go on and on. I think it's a good fit when it comes to football, X's and O's, when it comes to saving money, when it comes to putting butts in the seats. And I'm just really excited for it culturally. I think we match up better with those type of schools than we do with Southern Miss. I mean, sorry, but Boca Raton to Hattiesburg is quite a big jump that nobody cares for.
I think.
It's multiple jumps on multiple flights.
Yeah, exactly.
Thinking about taking a step back of FAU, it makes a lot of sense for the teams in the West.
Mm-hmm.
Lumping all of the Louisianas together, throwing in Texas State. I mean, UALR, Arkansas Little Rock, and I mean UTEP kind of. I mean, UTEP should just go to like the Mountain West, because they're kind of like UTEP really is in the middle. If you take away UTEP, then Conference USA moves over eastward a whole lot. But
San Marcos, where Texas State is only like a couple hours away from San Antonio.
Not even.
Right.
It's like less than an hour.
They don't play each other. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Let's look at the history, and I think college football overall has gotten away from this. What has made college football popular? It's local rivalries in these little towns fighting over something that's super important to them. We'll just use Tuscaloosa and Auburn, for example, right? These little towns fighting over something that's super important to them. And nationally, we started to catch on over the last few decades and realized how cool this was, because it means so much to these people locally that I want to watch this, right? Like, it's interesting to us, and we've gotten away from that because it's so much of, well, my conference is slightly better than yours, or, we're trying to go above you and this type of thing. So it's like, no, just play who's around you. I mean, ultimately, what is college football? What is to the average FAU fan, right? You want to beat the school where your buddy in the office went. That's what matters. That doesn't happen. I mean, how many offices in South Florida have a UTSA grad?
Right. Yeah.
Right? There's probably a few Georgia State grads, maybe, or Georgia Southern grads, especially in Jacksonville.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Where a lot of FAU has a ton of alumni in Jacksonville, right? I have dozens of friends from college that are all from Jacksonville.
Dude,
yeah, Statesboro is an hour and a half drive from there. So you got to think, if you're an FAU alumni that went back to, Duval County, wow, that's a game you can just drive up to right up the street.
Also, I mean, thinking of Georgia State, there are when I, used to work for FAU, and I would travel to Atlanta, I would meet FAU alumni all the time. So there are a ton of South Florida transplants living in Atlanta. So like, they would never, a lot of them are the type of alumni that, there was no football when they were here, or football was just starting. But given the chance, FAU's had some national prevalence. Hey, I'm going to get to go see my alma mater for the first time ever, and it's right down the street from me.
Yeah, I mean, so, when you really think about it now, how crazy is it? FAU doesn't have a single team in its conference with the state that it shares the most border with.
Yeah, yeah. That's true.
That's crazy.
We're all the way at the bottom of the state too. It'd be slightly better if we were further north, but we're not. So like, we were talking about this before we started recording, but for teams like women's tennis to have to travel to El Paso or Huntington, that's brutal. That's rough. So it just makes more sense, especially, with the economic times that we're about to see, to just bring it together. And like we're talking about Auburn and Tuscaloosa, I think it would do wonders for rivalries at FAU. Because when I think of our rivals, obviously we have that school to that south, down south, the community college down there. Then we have this growing rivalry with Marshall. I feel like a lot of fans from our generation, Dan, Shane, we grew up not liking Middle Tennessee because they would always beat us. It would always hurt. Western Kentucky has that feeling towards us because we would always beat them. So I think this would be great to grow some more regional rivalries, like you said, Shane, which would help bring attendance to FAU Stadium. So, I mean, that being said, do you guys see any other, like, maybe future rivalries if this were to happen, this conference merger, this realignment were to happen? Do you guys see any rivalries, maybe like Georgia State, because we're both in large urban areas, for example?
Yeah. Sorry, I had to take myself off mute there. The Georgia, any Georgia school makes a ton of sense. And and I think that totally makes sense. And then, one of the things that I wanted to circle back to is, like, Conference USA just kind of was just like picking whatever schools they could as other schools would leave. USF and UCF were left, and they needed to, fill those spots relatively quickly. Same thing with Eastern Carolina. So they picked up Charlotte, and picked up FAU and FIU, which is how things like Conference USA used to be more centralized, and then just got bigger and bigger and bigger in this, like, amorphous blob of a conference. And I don't know. So I think now, I guess, you could say Conference USA did that to survive. And certainly FAU jumped at the opportunity to play in a bigger conference. I mean, I know there was a lot of talk about that, like, oh, okay, FAU could wait a year, so on and so forth, but FAU had to pay the Sun Belt. I think it was like $200,000 or $100,000 or something like that. Or maybe it was only like 80. I remember it being, at the time, the type of money that FAU had to struggle for. But it was beneficial for us. So, Conference USA just took schools that they needed to survive. And now it's kind of like, okay, let's bring this back a little bit. Let's, it's a whole, nationally and globally an awful thing, but in the, taking what we can out of it. And, in right now in college sports, this is an opportunity to like, okay, this makes sense. It's going to save everybody a lot of money. Let's just do this. And Jack, you mentioned cuts. Appalachian State cut 3 men's sports today. And, we know FIU has dropped some. FAU hasn't. But also FAU has been kind of right at that, I guess, bare minimum point. We don't have a ton of Division I varsity.
What is it? Is it 16 teams? Usually conferences have a minimum. I think ECU dropped a few teams.
Yeah, so now they're at risk of it.
Yeah, but they were at the high mark. They had like 20.
Like we didn't have Division I wrestling. There were sports that we don't have that we don't necessarily need to cut. But again, you could see men's soccer, you could see men's tennis being come at those first on the chopping block, which hopefully if we can get this going, we wouldn't have to do.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, and not that I think it's just forcing things to move faster. Anyone who's paid attention, I know Jack said this is message board fodder. People have been talking about these type of Conference USA Sunbelt realignment since before FAU joined Conference USA, right? And Dan made the point, it was just about scooping up teams to get as many TV dollars as you could, right? If you were more, the theory was a few years ago, it was more, let's get as many TV markets as we can, and those TV markets will turn into money. Well, the year after FAU joined Conference USA's TV deal got cut by 2/3. So it's like, wait, what are we doing? Is North Texas's Dallas TV market bringing us any money? No. You know what I mean? So why do we have to go on a Thursday night, travel 1,500 miles and play 9 o'clock at night like we did a few years ago? That makes no sense, and then, the talk with the Olympic sports. The FAU's women's basketball team should never, ever have to travel to El Paso, right? Or any team for that matter.
Right.
It's, I think there was one article, and I forgot who wrote it in the Orlando Sentinel. It's outside of the football sports, a lot of the Olympic sports and other sports, there's no reason everyone in the state of Florida shouldn't be playing each other, right? Most schedules should just be made up of local teams to save money outside of kind of the bigger money-making sports. Conferences should really only matter in football and basketball. The other sports should be trying to operate as efficiently as possible. Not that I'm demeaning those sports. It's just that they don't produce money. I mean, I made the point with LSU is LSU's football program made $51 million. The basketball program made a couple $1 million, and every other program at LSU operated at a loss. This is LSU, where they probably get sometimes 6,000-7,000 people to attend a gymnastics tournament, right?
They do, actually.
Yeah, it's huge there. I mean, that's 3 of our basketball games to go to gymnastics, right? And they were still operating at a loss. Granted, they're paying coaches and stuff a lot more, but there's no point in all the travel. This only makes sense, and I know it won't happen this year, but I think going into next year, we'll definitely see some changes.
Yeah, I think it at this point, it's part of this whole thing is it's allowed people to take a step back and really start to think about stuff. And I think athletic directors and presidents are kind of they, especially at a time right now where there might be less, where there's certainly going to be less money coming in from everywhere. Certainly from not just athletics revenue, but from as a state institution, the money that's coming from the Board of Governors or from the state to a school like FAU or any other public state institution, there's less of that coming in. They're looking, kind of going line by line, and, their budget people in the president's office saying, hey, I think this makes a lot of sense. And this has really given us the opportunity and the leaders of the institutions to say, let's talk about this and really give it more thought, as opposed to just being on the message boards. So
can I add one more thing before we go?
Yeah.
Because I just want to say, the administrators and athletic directors will be having those conversations, but I think something will happen, Shane. But it's all egos. College sports is all egos more than any other sport in the world. And we're going to have to see which is going to hurt, hypothetical, for example, Louisiana Tech's ego more. Cutting 3-4 programs or having to go on a conference with Louisiana Monroe. I think once the power brokers figure out which of those two is going to be the lesser hit, hopefully sooner rather than later. And I think that's going to be playing the ULMs of the world instead of losing men's and women's soccer. I think that's when we're going to see some serious change.
Or
it's going to take a while for that to happen.
How about this? Hey, Louisiana Tech, would you rather have 15,000 people in your stadium because FIU's there, or would you rather have 27,000 people or even over that because you're playing Lafayette ULM and their fans made the 2-hour trip?
Well, we're talking about the same program that went 9-3 with one of the nation's best offenses and declined the bowl game because they were in the same bowl as Louisiana, Lafayette, or Monroe, one of those two. So
yeah,
it's egos. We just don't know. I agree with you. But
how much fun, hypothetically, and this will never happen, if FAU, UCF, and FIU or USF were all in the same conference? I mean, half our schedule would be fun in-state games that we'd be chalking our buddies up about. It would, but
yeah, every game would sell out. That's for sure. And that UCF isn't selling out games against ECU. That's just the way it is. And I have that exact conference set up in my NCAA 14 dynasty, and it is lit. I can confirm it is nuts.
So, we've kind of exhausted the Conference USA talk, but, we certainly would love to hear from our Conference Realignment talk. We'd love to hear what you guys have to say. And we'll kind of wrap up with this. FAU did pick up, one commit and a walk-on, essentially, a couple weeks ago. For those that didn't know, Florida Tech, I believe they're a Division II school, and them and University of West Florida were the only Division II schools in the state of Florida that had football programs. That because of this coronavirus, Florida Tech decided to cut their program altogether, which is unfortunate for all of the coaches and athletes there. But there was someone who I believe he's walking on a linebacker who who knows where he'll play at FAU. But that's one kind of one commit we got, and then we got a new one. I can't remember his name. Shane, I'll just let you talk about him. FAU's latest commit.
Jediah Smith, out of Dr. Phillips High School, who's a powerhouse that's produced recently. Clinton Dix went there as a safety, and another NFL player, just not off the top of my head, who plays for the 49ers at safety. I posted about him in the thread. I wrote this story. This commitment kind of came together fast. FAU really worked him hard. They love this tape. Anyone who watches it, this kid is physical. I think I made the comparison today that he's taller, Jalen Young. If he plays safety, he also could play corner as well. He has that length, but he's really physical, like old school type player. He's a lot like Trevor Reeves, who they got in the last cycle from Miami Edison. Very similar type things. As we're starting to see these coaches recruit, you're starting to see similarities of what they're looking for. But this is one of those commits that I know it's signing date's way ahead, and it doesn't grab all the headlines with he's not rated yet. He will get rated, I think, once camps get going again, but it doesn't grab now. But 4 years from now, he's gonna be one of these guys that is getting drafted in the later rounds, like many DBs have. He has that type of potential and frame. So he's definitely someone FAU fans should be excited about.
That's nuts. I mean, we're already so stacked at the safety position. So FAU is really becoming DBU at this point, especially at the mid-major G5 level. I don't see another team in Conference USA, however long CUSA in the current rendition is alive for, competing with the kind of athletes we have back there. It's sick.
I also do want to thank, I've now been trying to get the recruiting coverage up even more. It was disappointing with the COVID. I wasn't able to obviously get out to all the camps and stuff like I normally would be able to, but thank you. I know the small FEU Twitter mafia, you guys know who I'm talking about. Thank you for all the support you guys have been given and just bringing, more and more attention to FAU. Also, I just want to encourage people. I know a lot of people listen to this, post on Twitter and stuff, but if I can encourage you guys to also post on the Nest as well, kind of connect some of the fans who don't, aren't always on Twitter, that are, most of their talk comes from the forum, kind of connecting them with kind of the younger Twitter FAU mafia, and just the more fans we have conversating, the better. So, the Owl's Nest has given all of us a chance to do this podcast and write and do all this stuff. So support the Nest. It's free and easy. Go on there and talk FAU.
Just say how much martial arts you're in. It's all good.
Yeah, that's the password. That's the code word. It's an interesting time where, like, if you wanted to have a discussion, FAU Owl's Nest was the only place that you could go to for so long, and now you can just throw up a tweet. But
we're the only ones cover FAU Owl's Nest, just to pretty much the only ones covering FAU right now.
Yeah, and the depth of conversation is going to be much greater and more intelligent, and less troll bound than Twitter. So FAUOwlsNest.com. You can find all of our shows there, all of the podcasts. You can check them out there. Also, as usual, check us out on iTunes and Spotify. If
you want to read a game thread from 2006, the Nest has it.
Or the Melvin
the
Gordon.
site has been there since the beginning. All right?
Yes. Yeah. If you want to read the Melvin Gordon saga, the MG3, I believe that's still up there.
For all you kids, you young FAU fans, you don't know about MG3, all right?
Yeah.
Do yourself a service and go look at the Melvin German 3 thread, because we thought we were winning natties.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
We had a Heisman here.
That's a rite of passage.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll kind of wrap things up there. And again, we like Shane said, we appreciate all the support that you've given us, and we're trying to make sure that there's something to take away your time during through all of this, and we'll get through it together. And certainly any late breaking news, we will you can be sure that we'll be here to bring it to you. And for Jane and Shaq, we really appreciate you joining with us. Stay safe, be well, and go Owls.